They say you never really know someone until they show you who they are in the darkness. I learned that lesson on a cold November evening when the man I had loved for 8 years looked me dead in the eye and told me to get out of his house. Our house. The house we bought together. The house where we planned our future, where we dreamed of raising children, where I thought I was safe, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment my perfect life started cracking at the seams. My name is Sarah, and for the past 8 years, I believed I was living a fairy tale. I met Daniel at a coffee shop when I was 23. He was charming, successful, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. He worked in finance, always dressed in expensive suits, drove a luxury car. He made me feel special. Protected, loved. We got married 2 years after we met. It was a beautiful wedding. Not too big, not too small, just perfect. My father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. He shook Daniel's hand and told him to take care of his little girl. Daniel promised he would. He promised my father he would protect me, cherish me, build a life with me. My dad passed away 6 months after our wedding. Heart attack. Sudden. Devastating. I was broken. Daniel held me through those dark months. He was my rock. At least, that's what I thought. After Dad died, I inherited a few things. Some old furniture, family photos, his watch collection, and an old bank card he always kept in his wallet. It was from a bank I didn't even recognize. Some small private institution. The card looked ancient, worn at the edges. I almost threw it away, but something made me keep it. Maybe it was sentimentality, maybe it was fate. Life moved forward. Daniel's career took off. He was making more money than ever. We upgraded our house, bought new cars, went on expensive vacations. I worked too, as a graphic designer from home, but my income was nothing compared to his. He made sure I knew that. Not in a cruel way, at least not at first, just casual comments. Little reminders that he was the real provider. Then things started changing. Slowly. So slowly I almost didn't notice. He started coming home later, working weekends. Business trips that seemed to multiply. When I asked about it, he'd get defensive. Tell me I was being paranoid, that I didn't understand how demanding his job was. That I should be grateful he was working so hard for our future. I believed him. I wanted to believe him, but then came the distance. The coldness. He stopped touching me the way he used to. Stopped looking at me like I mattered. Conversations became transactional. Did you pay the electric bill? What's for dinner? I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up. I felt myself becoming invisible in my own home. 6 months ago, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. Jewelry. Expensive jewelry. My heart jumped because our anniversary was coming up. Maybe he was planning something special. Maybe I was wrong about everything. Our anniversary came and went. No jewelry. No gift at all. Just a distracted kiss on the forehead and another late night at the office. That's when the doubt really started eating at me, but I pushed it down. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure. That successful men work hard and I needed to be more understanding. Then came that November evening. The evening that shattered everything. I remember every detail of that night. The way the rain was hitting the windows, the smell of the pasta I had made for dinner, getting cold on the table, the sound of Daniel's car pulling into the driveway an hour later than he said he'd be home. He walked in and I knew immediately something was different. His expression wasn't just tired or stressed. It was cold. Determined. Like he'd made a decision and nothing was going to change his mind. I smiled at him anyway, asked him how his day was. Told him dinner was ready. He didn't even look at the food. He just stood there in the hallway, briefcase still in his hand, and said words I'll never forget. We need to talk. Those 4 words. The death sentence of any relationship. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands shaking. He didn't sit. He stood across from me, maintaining distance like I was something contaminated. This isn't working anymore, he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. Like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed. I asked him what he meant. What wasn't working? Was it something I did? Something I could fix? He laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and cruel. You really don't see it, do you? You've become a burden, Sarah. You contribute nothing. You live off my success. You're just there, taking up space in my life. Every word was a knife. I felt my chest tightening, my eyes burning with tears. I was desperately trying to hold back. I reminded him that I worked, that I contributed to our household, that I took care of everything at home so he could focus on his career. He waved his hand dismissively. Your little design projects? That's cute, Sarah. Really cute. But let's be honest about what pays for this house. This lifestyle, everything you enjoy. I asked him if there was someone else. The question came out as a whisper because part of me already knew the answer. He didn't even have the decency to lie. He just shrugged. Does it matter? This marriage is over. I want you out. Out? I repeated the word like it was in a foreign language. This is my house too, Daniel. We bought this together. That's when his mask really fell off. That's when I saw the monster I'd been sleeping next to for 8 years. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase, threw it on the table in front of me. Actually, he said with a smirk that made my stomach turn, this house is in my name. Just mine. Check the deed. I opened the folder with trembling hands. He was right. The house deed listed only his name, but that was impossible. We bought this house together. I was there at the closing. I signed documents. Confused, I asked him how this was possible. He explained it so casually, like he was describing the weather. Apparently, 3 years ago, he refinanced the house. Told me the papers I was signing were just routine updates to our mortgage. But what I actually signed was a quit-claim deed, transferring my ownership to him completely. His lawyer friend had helped him set it up, made sure every legal loophole was covered. I felt like the floor was disappearing beneath me. Everything I thought was solid, everything I believed in, was just an illusion. But it got worse, so much worse. Daniel kept talking, and every word was designed to break me further. The cars? Both in his name. The bank accounts? He'd slowly been moving money into accounts I didn't have access to. Our joint account had barely enough to cover a month's expenses. I asked him why. Why would he do this? After everything we'd been through, he looked at me with such contempt. Such complete lack of feeling. Because I could, he said simply. Because I knew this day was coming and I'm not an idiot. You think I was going to let you take half of everything I worked for? I reminded him through tears that marriage was a partnership, that I had supported him, believed in him, stood by him. He actually rolled his eyes. Support? You were just there, Sarah. You didn't build anything. You didn't create anything. You were just the woman who happened to be around while I became successful. Then he dropped the final bomb. Jessica understands what it takes to be with someone like me. She's ambitious, driven. She actually adds value to my life. Jessica. His assistant, the woman he'd hired 2 years ago. The one he always said was just a colleague, just someone who helped manage his schedule. I felt something inside me die in that moment, not just my marriage, not just my trust, but something fundamental about who I was and what I believed about love and loyalty and promises. How long? I asked. My voice was barely audible. Does it matter? But since you're asking, about 18 months. She's been living in the downtown condo for the past 6 months. The downtown condo. The investment property he said was for rental income. Another lie in a web of lies. I want you out tonight, he said, checking his watch like this conversation was just an inconvenient interruption to his schedule. Pack whatever clothes you need. I'll have the rest of your stuff sent to wherever you end up. I just sat there, stunned, in shock. Unable to process what was happening, he grew impatient. Did you hear me? Get out. Now. Or I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Trespassing. In my own home. In the house where I'd lived for 6 years, I asked him where I was supposed to go. I had some money in our joint account, but not enough for a security deposit and first month's rent anywhere decent. He shrugged. Not my problem anymore. Maybe you should have thought about building your own career instead of coasting on mine. Something shifted in me then. Through the pain and shock and betrayal, something hardened. I stood up, looked him in the eye, and spoke with a calmness that surprised even me. You're going to regret this, Daniel. He laughed, actually laughed in my face. Is that a threat? What are you going to do, Sarah? You have nothing. You are nothing without me. You're just a woman with no money, no house, and no options, so please enlighten me. What exactly are you going to do? I didn't answer. I just walked upstairs to our bedroom, packed a suitcase with essentials, and left. I walked out into the rain with one suitcase, my laptop bag, and my purse. I sat in my car in the driveway, rain pouring down, watching the windows of the house I thought was my home. I could see Daniel inside, already on his phone, probably calling Jessica to tell her the deed was done. I had nowhere to go. My mother lived 3 states away in a retirement community. My close friends were all mutual friends, people who would probably take his side or stay neutral to avoid drama. I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind of place with flickering neon signs and questionable stains on the carpet. It cost $47 a night. I paid for 3 nights because that's all I could afford while I figured out what to do next. That first night, I cried until I had nothing left. I cried for my marriage, for my trust. For my father who wasn't here to help me, for the woman I used to be who believed in love and partnership and happily ever after. But somewhere around 3 in the morning, the crying stopped, and the anger began. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a pounding headache, but also with a strange clarity. I was done being a victim. Done being the woman who just accepted whatever life threw at her. I sat on that stained motel bed and started making a plan. I needed money. I needed a place to stay. I needed to understand exactly what legal rights I had, if any. I called a lawyer. Actually, I called 5 lawyers. None of them could see me for at least a week, and all of them wanted a retainer I couldn't afford. The system that was supposed to protect people like me required money I didn't have. I checked our joint bank account. Daniel had transferred almost everything out. There was exactly $823 left. Enough to survive for maybe 2 weeks if I was extremely careful. I applied for jobs. Sent out my design portfolio to every agency and company I could find, but the responses that came back were all the same. We'll keep your resume on file. Unfortunately, we've decided to go with another candidate. Thank you for your interest. By day 4, I was running out of options and running out of hope. I was sitting in that motel room eating ramen noodles because they were cheap when I started going through my purse looking for loose change. That's when I found it. My father's old bank card, the one I'd kept all these years out of sentimentality. I turned it over in my hands. The card was for something called Heritage Private Bank. I'd never heard of it. The card itself looked ancient, the magnetic strip worn, the numbers barely visible. On a whim, I Googled the bank. To my surprise, it still existed. A small, exclusive private banking institution that catered to wealthy families. The website was minimal, elegant, and gave almost no information. I decided to visit. What did I have to lose? At worst, the card wouldn't work and I'd be exactly where I was now. At best, maybe my father had left a small account I didn't know about. Even a few $1,000s would help. The next morning, I drove to the address listed on the website. The bank was in an old building downtown, the kind of place that looked like it belonged to a different era. Stone facade. Heavy wooden doors. Everything about it screamed old money. I almost turned around. I looked at my reflection in the car mirror. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Wearing jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, I didn't belong in a place like this. But I went in anyway. What choice did I have? The lobby was intimidating. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. Leather furniture that probably cost more than my car. A woman at the reception desk looked up at me with polite but obvious assessment. I clearly didn't fit the usual clientele. "Can I help you?" she asked in a tone that suggested she doubted it. I walked up to her desk, pulled out my father's old card, and explained that my father had passed away and I was hoping to inquire about any accounts associated with this card. She took the card, examined it, and her expression changed immediately. The polite skepticism vanished, replaced by something close to shock. "One moment, please," she said, her voice suddenly much more respectful. She picked up her phone and made a quiet call. Within minutes, a man in an expensive suit appeared. He introduced himself as Mr. Harrison, a senior account manager. "Ms. Chen," he said, extending his hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a valued client. Please, come with me." I followed him through the lobby, past other customers who looked like they owned small countries, into a private office. He offered me coffee, water, anything I needed. I just wanted to know if there was an account. If there was any money left. Mr. Harrison sat behind his desk, typed something into his computer, and his expression became very serious. "Mrs. Chen," he said carefully, "are you aware of the full extent of your father's accounts with us?" I shook my head. I knew he'd worked hard, saved money, but he lived simply. I assumed he had maybe a retirement account, some savings. Mr. Harrison turned his computer screen toward me. I looked at the numbers, blinked. Looked again. The numbers didn't change. "This can't be right," I whispered. I stared at the screen, certain there had been some mistake. The account showed a balance of $12 million. $12 million. "There has to be an error," I said, my voice shaking. "My father was a mechanic. He fixed cars. He lived in a small house. He drove an old truck." Mr. Harrison smiled gently. "Your father was indeed a mechanic, Mrs. Chen. But he was also one of the most financially savvy individuals I've had the privilege to work with." He pulled up more files, explained how my father had started investing in the 1980s. Small amounts at first, but consistent. He had bought property in areas before they developed, invested in companies before they became household names. Made smart, patient decisions over decades. "Your father lived modestly by choice," Mr. Harrison explained. "He believed in building wealth quietly. He told me once that the happiest rich people are the ones nobody knows are rich. But why didn't he tell me?" I asked, tears streaming down my face now. "Why didn't he let me know?" Mr. Harrison pulled out a letter from the file. "Your father left this for you. He instructed us to give it to you when you came to claim the account." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope, my father's handwriting. His words. "My dearest Sarah," the letter began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry I can't be there to guide you through whatever brought you to this bank. I kept this account secret for a reason. I wanted you to build your own life, make your own choices, fall in love for the right reasons, not because someone wanted access to money. I worried about you when you married Daniel. Something about that boy never sat right with me. Too smooth. Too concerned with appearances. But you loved him, and I wanted to respect your choice. I hoped I was wrong about him. This money is yours, sweetheart. All of it. Use it wisely. Use it to build the life you deserve. And if Daniel or anyone else has hurt you, use it to stand up for yourself. You're stronger than you know. You're my daughter, and we Chens don't stay down. I love you always, Dad." I sat in that office and sobbed. Mr. Harrison discreetly left me alone for a few minutes, giving me space to process everything. When I finally composed myself, he returned with paperwork. We spent the next hour setting up access to the account, getting me a new card, discussing investment options and financial planning. "You're a wealthy woman now, Ms. Chen," he said as we finished. "I'd recommend being very careful about who you tell. Money changes relationships. I already knew that lesson all too well." I left the bank in a daze. $12 million. My father had left me $12 million, and I'd had no idea. I thought about all those times Daniel made me feel worthless, dependent, small. All those comments about my income, my contributions, my value. I sat in my car and started to laugh. I laughed until I cried. I laughed at the cosmic irony of it all. Daniel thought he'd left me with nothing. He thought I was helpless. Broken, at his mercy. He had no idea what was coming. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed in that cheap motel. But now it wasn't because I couldn't afford better. It was strategic. I needed Daniel to believe I was struggling, desperate. Exactly where he wanted me. I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I hired Margaret Chen, no relation but a happy coincidence, one of the most aggressive and expensive divorce attorneys in the state. She cost $500 an hour and was worth every penny. I walked into her office with printouts of everything. The deed that Daniel had fraudulently transferred, the financial records I'd managed to access, screenshots of text messages, a timeline of his relationship with Jessica. Margaret listened to my story, her expression growing harder with each detail. He really thought he covered all his bases, didn't he? She said when I finished. I nodded. He was very careful, very calculating. She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. Men like your husband always make one critical mistake, she said. They're so busy being clever that they forget the law isn't stupid. That quit-claim deed? We can challenge that. He obtained it through fraud and misrepresentation. Those joint accounts he drained? That's dissipation of marital assets. His relationship with Jessica? That's adultery, which still matters in this state when it comes to division of assets. Can we win? I asked. Margaret leaned forward. Honey, we're not just going to win. We're going to destroy him, but I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say. Can you do that? I thought about my father's letter. About standing up for myself. About not staying down. Absolutely, I said. The plan was simple but required patience. We would file for divorce, but not immediately. First, we needed to gather more evidence. Document everything. Build an airtight case. Margaret hired a private investigator. Within a week, we had photos of Daniel and Jessica together. At restaurants. Leaving the downtown condo. On a weekend trip to wine country. The investigator even got photos of expensive jewelry, the same pieces from the receipt I'd found months ago on Jessica's wrist and neck. We documented every asset. The house. The cars. His investment accounts. His retirement funds. The downtown condo. Everything he thought he'd hidden or protected. Meanwhile, I played my part perfectly. I sent Daniel occasional text messages. Sad, defeated messages asking if we could talk. Asking if there was any way to work things out. Each message was calculated to make him feel superior. Secure. Convinced that I was broken and helpless. He responded exactly as I expected, short, dismissive messages. Sometimes he ignored me completely. Once he sent me a message saying I needed to accept reality and move on. That I was embarrassing myself. I smiled every time I read his responses. He had no idea. I used some of my inheritance to quietly make some moves of my own. I bought a beautiful condo across town, furnished it exactly how I wanted. For the first time in years, I made choices based only on what I liked, not what Daniel would approve of. I also started working on my design business seriously. With money no longer a worry, I could be selective, take on interesting projects. Build a portfolio I was proud of. I realized how much I'd let my own ambitions shrink to accommodate Daniel's ego. 6 weeks after he threw me out, we were ready. Margaret filed divorce papers that landed on Daniel like a nuclear bomb. I wasn't there when Daniel received the divorce papers, but his lawyer called Margaret within an hour. The panic in that call, which Margaret recorded with permission, was beautiful. Daniel wanted to meet, wanted to talk, wanted to negotiate. Margaret's response was ice cold. All communication goes through me. Your client had his chance to handle this with dignity. That ship has sailed. The papers we filed didn't just ask for divorce. They asked for the house, claiming fraud in the quit-claim deed. They asked for half of all assets, including the downtown condo he thought was secret. They asked for spousal support. They documented his adultery. They outlined every way he'd violated his fiduciary duty to me as a spouse. But here's the beautiful part. We didn't mention my inheritance. As far as Daniel knew, I'd somehow scraped together enough for a lawyer, but I was still the desperate, broke woman he'd thrown out. His lawyer tried everything, offered settlements, claimed we had no proof, threatened to drag things out in court. Margaret never blinked. "Court is fine with us," she'd say. "We have an airtight case and a client who's more than willing to wait for justice." What Daniel didn't know was that we'd also filed complaints with his employer. You see, Jessica wasn't just his assistant. She was also directly under his supervision. Their relationship violated company policy, and the expenses he'd charged to his corporate account for their trips, their dinners, their gifts, that was misuse of company funds. 2 weeks after we filed for divorce, Daniel was suspended from his job pending an investigation. That's when he finally broke down and called me directly, violating the no-contact order Margaret had established. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail, listened to him beg, plead, claimed this was all a misunderstanding, promise we could work things out. I deleted the message and sent the recording to Margaret. He tried to reach me through mutual friends. Suddenly, people who hadn't returned my calls in weeks were messaging me, saying Daniel wanted to apologize, that he made a mistake, that he still loved me. I blocked every single one of them. Real friends don't disappear when things get hard and only reappear when it's convenient. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 8 weeks after filing. That gave us time to prepare our case and let Daniel dig his hole deeper. His lawyer tried to argue that the quitclaim deed was legitimate, that I'd signed it willingly. But Margaret had found the lawyer friend who'd helped Daniel set it up, and under threat of being charged as an accessory to fraud, he turned over emails that showed Daniel's clear intent to deceive me. They tried to argue that the downtown condo was purchased before our marriage. We had bank records showing it was bought 4 years into our marriage, funded partially with money from our joint accounts. They tried to claim his relationship with Jessica started after he asked me for divorce. We had text messages going back 18 months, credit card receipts, hotel bookings, every lie unraveled. Every scheme exposed. The judge at the preliminary hearing looked at Daniel with unconcealed disgust. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice sharp, "I've seen many divorce cases in my career, but the level of premeditation and deception here is extraordinary. You systematically stripped your wife of her legal rights while carrying on an extramarital affair and misrepresenting your assets." Daniel tried to speak, to explain, but the judge cut him off. "I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all assets pending final hearing, the house, the vehicles, all accounts. Nothing gets sold, transferred, or withdrawn. Do you understand?" Daniel's face went pale. Jessica, sitting behind him in the courtroom, looked like she wanted to disappear. But I saved my best card for last. The final hearing was scheduled for 3 months out. During those months, Daniel's life fell apart piece by piece, and I watched it happen with no sympathy. His employer concluded their investigation. He was fired for ethics violations and misuse of company funds. They demanded repayment of over $40,000 in personal expenses he'd disguised as business costs. Jessica was also fired. Turns out, when you're caught in an affair with your married supervisor and implicated in company fraud, your career prospects diminish significantly. Without his income, Daniel couldn't afford his lawyer. He had to switch to a cheaper attorney who was competent but clearly overwhelmed by Margaret's aggressive strategy. He had to move out of our house due to the asset freeze, couldn't access most of his money, couldn't sell anything. I heard through the grapevine that he was staying with Jessica in a small apartment, and their relationship was falling apart under the stress. There's nothing like financial pressure and consequences to show you what someone is really made of. Apparently, Jessica wasn't quite as committed when Daniel wasn't successful and wealthy. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My design business was taking off. I'd landed several major clients. I was making more money than I ever had, and that wasn't even counting the inheritance I still hadn't disclosed. I ran into one of our former mutual friends at a coffee shop. She looked shocked to see me looking healthy, happy, well-dressed. "Sarah, oh my God, I heard about the divorce. Are you okay?" "Where are you staying?" I smiled sweetly. "I'm doing great, actually. Better than I've been in years." "How's Daniel?" Her expression shifted. "Uncomfortable. Guilty." "Oh, I wouldn't know. We don't really talk anymore." Translation: she'd picked his side initially and now regretted it. I just nodded. "Take care," I said, and walked away. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. As the final hearing approached, Daniel made one last desperate attempt. He showed up at my condo. I don't know how he found my address, but there he was, looking terrible, unshaven, tired, desperate. I watched him through my doorbell camera, listened to him knock. Heard him call my name, beg me to just talk to him. I called the police for violation of the restraining order Margaret had obtained. He was escorted away in handcuffs. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no anger, no pity. Just a calm certainty that I was doing the right thing. The day of the final hearing arrived. I dressed carefully, professional but powerful. Navy suit, hair and makeup perfect. I looked like success, like someone who couldn't be broken. Daniel showed up looking defeated. His cheaper lawyer looked nervous. Jessica wasn't there. I'd heard she'd moved back to her hometown, relationship with Daniel completely destroyed. The courtroom wasn't packed, but there were enough people there to witness what was about to happen. The judge reviewed all the evidence. The fraudulent quitclaim deed, the hidden assets, the adultery, the misuse of funds, the systematic deception. She didn't mince words in her ruling. "Mr. Anderson, I find that you engaged in a calculated long-term scheme to defraud your wife of her marital rights and assets. This is among the most egregious cases of marital misconduct I've encountered. Therefore, I am ruling as follows. The quitclaim deed is void. The marital home is to be sold and proceeds split equally after Mrs. Anderson is reimbursed for her original down payment contribution. All other marital assets are to be divided 60-40 in Mrs. Anderson's favor due to Mr. Anderson's dissipation of marital funds and fraudulent conduct. Mr. Rees. Anderson is to pay spousal support in the amount of $5,000 per month for 5 years. Mr. Surser. Anderson is also responsible for all of Mrs. Anderson's legal fees." Daniel's face went from pale to gray. He'd lost everything. The house he tried to steal, the assets he tried to hide. Plus, he owed me spousal support and had to pay Margaret's fees, which by this point were over $100,000. But the judge wasn't done. Additionally, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to fraud and perjury. Daniel actually swayed on his feet. His lawyer had to steady him. Court is adjourned. I walked out of that courtroom with my head high. Margaret walked beside me, a satisfied smile on her face. "Congratulations," she said. "You just got everything you deserved." "Not quite everything," I replied. "Not yet." The divorce was finalized. The house sold quickly. Even after the split and reimbursing my down payment, my share was substantial. Not that I needed it, but it was the principal. Daniel paid the first month of spousal support late and short. Margaret immediately filed for contempt. The court added penalties. He paid the next month on time. I heard through former colleagues that he was working a mediocre job in a different industry. His reputation in finance was destroyed. His relationship with Jessica was long over. He was living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet. Everything he'd built his identity on, his success, his wealth, his status, all of it was gone, but I still had one more move to make. You see, during the divorce proceedings, we'd never disclosed my inheritance. It wasn't marital property. It came from my father after we were married, but inheritance is generally considered separate property. We didn't have to reveal it. But Daniel didn't know that. As far as he knew, I'd just gotten really lucky with my lawyer and my timing. I waited 6 months after the divorce was final. Let him settle into his new, diminished reality. Let him think the worst was over. Then I made my move. I bought the building where Daniel's new company had their offices. It was an investment property that had come on the market, and with my resources, it was an easy purchase. I didn't tell him immediately. I let his company sign a lease renewal with my property management company. Let him work there for 2 months under the new ownership. Then I had my property manager inform all tenants that I was renovating the building and converting it to residential condos. All commercial leases would not be renewed. They had 6 months to relocate. Daniel's company couldn't afford to move and lose 6 months of business. They folded. Daniel lost his job again. Did I feel guilty? Not even a little. But that still wasn't the end. I had one final piece to put in place. I'd been in contact with Daniel's former employer. The company he'd been fired from. They were facing a lawsuit from shareholders over the misuse of funds, and Daniel was named as a defendant. I provided their lawyers with additional evidence we'd gathered during the divorce. Information that showed the scope of his financial misconduct was even larger than they'd initially discovered. The lawsuit expanded. Daniel was now facing potential criminal charges for embezzlement, not just civil penalties. I watched it all unfold from a distance, untouchable, successful, happy. My design business was thriving. I'd hired 2 employees, moved into a beautiful office space, was making a name for myself in the industry. I went on dates, met interesting people, remembered what it felt like to be valued for who I was, not what I could provide. I traveled. Took trips my father had always wanted to take, but never did. Sat on beaches. Climbed mountains. Saw the world through eyes that weren't clouded by someone else's contempt. And through it all, I kept my inheritance private. Lived comfortably but not ostentatiously. My father had been right. The happiest rich people are the ones nobody knows are rich. A year after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, working on a design project, when someone sat down across from me. I looked up, ready to politely tell them the seat was taken, and froze. It was Daniel. He looked terrible. Older than his years. Worn down. Broken. "Sarah, please," he said, his voice hoarse. "I know I have no right to ask, but I need to talk to you. I should have left. Should have walked away, but something made me stay. Maybe curiosity, maybe a need for closure." "You have 5 minutes," I said, not looking away from my laptop. He took a shaky breath. "I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my money. I'm facing criminal charges. Jessica's gone. My friends won't return my calls. My family barely speaks to me." "I know," I said simply. He looked shocked. "You know, have you been keeping tabs on me?" "I didn't need to. Your downfall was pretty public." He put his head in his hands. I was wrong. About everything. I was arrogant and cruel, and I destroyed the best thing I ever had. I finally looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the shell of the man who'd once made me feel so small. "Yes, you did," I agreed. "You destroyed your marriage, your integrity, your future. All because you thought you were smarter than everyone else. Because you thought I was worthless. I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." I closed my laptop. Looked at him with eyes that held no anger, no bitterness, just a calm, distant pity. "Daniel, your apology means nothing to me. You're not sorry you hurt me. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there were consequences. If you'd succeeded in your plan, if you'd gotten away with it, you'd still be living in that house with Jessica, spending money you stole from me and never giving me a second thought." "That's not true," he protested weakly. "Yes, it is. And you know what? I don't hate you. I actually feel sorry for you. You had love, loyalty, partnership, everything that actually matters, and you traded it for things, for status, for a trophy girlfriend, for a sense of superiority. And now you have nothing." I stood up, gathered my things. "Don't contact me again, Daniel. Move on with what's left of your life. Learn from this if you're capable of learning, but leave me alone." I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Oh, and Daniel? That woman you thought was worthless and dependent, she's doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. Turns out I was never the one who needed you. I left him sitting there and walked out into the sunshine. I never saw or heard from him again. 2 years have passed since that day in the coffee shop. 2 years since I walked away from Daniel and everything he represented. My life now is nothing like the life I had with him. It's better. Richer, not in money, though I have plenty of that. Richer in meaning, in purpose, in genuine connection. My design business has grown beyond anything I imagined. I have a team of 12 now. We work with clients all over the world. I've won industry awards, been featured in design magazines, built something I'm genuinely proud of. But more than that, I've built a life that's truly mine. I bought a house, nothing ostentatious. A beautiful craftsman-style home with a garden where I grow vegetables, where I sit on the porch in the evenings with a glass of wine and a book and feel completely at peace. I've reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage, made new friends who value me for who I am, built a community of people who support and challenge and celebrate each other. I even started dating again, though I'm in no rush. I've learned what red flags look like, what genuine respect feels like, what partnership actually means, and I've found ways to honor my father's legacy. I established a scholarship fund in his name for first-generation college students studying business or finance. I volunteer as a mentor for young women starting their own businesses. I use my resources to lift others up the way I wish someone had lifted me up when I was at my lowest. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the years I spent with Daniel. If I wish I'd seen the warning signs earlier. If I'm angry about the time I lost. The truth? I'm grateful for all of it. Those years taught me what I don't want, what I won't accept, what I'm worth. That betrayal taught me strength I didn't know I had. Resilience that has served me in every area of my life. That pain taught me compassion for others going through similar situations. It gave me the drive to help women who feel trapped, who think they have no options, who believe the lies their partners tell them about their worth. And my father's inheritance, the secret he kept to protect me, taught me that real love sometimes means letting people find their own way. It means trusting them to be strong enough to handle hard truths. I think about my dad often. Wish I could tell him about everything that happened. Thank him for the gift he left me. Not just the money, though that changed everything, but the letter. Those words reminding me that I'm stronger than I know. I keep that letter framed on my desk. Read it when I'm facing challenges, when I need to remember who I am and where I come from. As for Daniel, I heard he eventually moved to a different state, started over in some capacity. I hope he learned something from what happened. I hope he became a better person. Not for my sake, but for his own. But honestly, I rarely think about him anymore. He's a chapter in my story, but he's not the story itself. If you're listening to this and you're in a situation like I was, if you feel trapped or worthless or dependent on someone who makes you feel small, I want you to hear this. You are not helpless. You are not without options. You are not defined by someone else's opinion of your worth. I know it doesn't feel that way. I know when you're in the middle of it, when someone you love is tearing you down day after day, it's hard to see a way out. It's hard to imagine a better future. But it exists. That better future. That stronger version of you. That life where you wake up without dread. Where you make decisions based on what you want, not what someone else will approve of. Where you remember what it feels like to respect yourself. Getting there isn't easy. It wasn't easy for me, even with resources many people don't have. It required courage I had to dig deep to find. It required accepting help, which was hard for someone who'd been made to feel like a burden. But every hard step was worth it. If you're in a marriage or relationship that makes you feel less than you are, start documenting everything. Keep records. Save messages. Take photos. Open a bank account in your own name if you can. Talk to a lawyer, even if you think you can't afford one. Many do free consultations. Tell someone you trust what's happening. Don't suffer in isolation. Don't believe the voice telling you this is normal, that you deserve it, that you're the problem. And if you have resources you're keeping secret, don't feel guilty about that. Your survival, your escape plan, your future security, these are not betrayals, they're wisdom. I also want to say something to anyone who's thinking about doing what Daniel did. Anyone who's planning to betray a partner, hide assets, manipulate situations to their advantage. Don't. Not because you might get caught, though you probably will. Not because there might be consequences, though there definitely will be. But because when you treat another human being, especially someone who's loved you and trusted you, with that level of contempt and cruelty, you damage something fundamental in yourself. Daniel didn't just lose his money and status, he lost his integrity, his self-respect, his ability to trust or be trusted. He'll carry that for the rest of his life, no matter where he goes or what he rebuilds. The person you become when you're willing to destroy someone you once loved, that person is someone you have to live with forever. It's not worth it. It's never worth it. I was thinking the other day about what revenge really means, what justice looks like. For a long time, I thought revenge was about making Daniel suffer the way he'd made me suffer, about taking everything from him the way he'd tried to take everything from me. And yes, there was satisfaction in seeing the consequences catch up with him, in watching his carefully constructed lies fall apart, in knowing that he lost everything he'd valued more than our marriage. But that's not what healed me. That's not what made me whole again. What healed me was building something better, creating a life I actually wanted instead of accepting a life someone else designed for me, discovering my own strength, my own worth, my own capacity to stand back up after being knocked down. The best revenge wasn't destroying Daniel, it was becoming someone he could never diminish again. Someone who knows her value and won't accept less than she deserves. It was proving that his assessment of me, worthless, dependent, nothing without him, was completely wrong. Sometimes people ask me if I ever feel lonely in my big house, if I miss being married, if I regret not having the traditional family life I once imagined. The truth is, I'm not lonely. I'm alone sometimes, but that's different. Loneliness is feeling isolated when you're surrounded by people. I felt lonelier in my marriage than I've ever felt in my life since. Now, when I'm alone, I'm at peace. I enjoy my own company. I don't need someone else to validate my existence or give my life meaning. And as for traditional family life, I've learned that families come in many forms. My employees feel like family. My friends feel like family. The women I mentor, the students I help, the community I've built, that's family too. Maybe someday I'll meet someone and choose to share my life with them. But if I do, it will be from a place of wholeness, not from need. It will be a choice to add to an already complete life, not a desperate attempt to fill a void. That's the thing they don't tell you about rock bottom. About having everything stripped away, about being left with nothing but yourself. It's terrifying, but it's also liberating. When you lose everything, when you're forced to rebuild from scratch, you get to choose what to build. You're not constrained by what was. You're free to create what could be, and sometimes, if you're lucky and brave and willing to do the work, what you build is so much better than what you lost. Last month, I went back to visit my father's grave for the first time since everything happened. I brought flowers. Sat beside his headstone, told him everything. I told him about Daniel's betrayal, about the divorce, about finding his bank account and the letter, about building my business and my new life. I told him he was right, about Daniel, about my strength, about everything. And I thanked him. For the inheritance, yes. But more importantly, for raising me to be someone who doesn't stay down, someone who fights back, someone who knows their worth. I thought about what my life might have been if I'd never found that bank card. If I'd struggled alone with no resources, if I'd had to rebuild without that financial cushion. Would I have survived? Would I have found my strength anyway? I like to think I would have. I like to think the strength was always there, that the money just made the path easier. But honestly, I don't know. What I do know is that having resources gave me options, gave me the ability to fight back, gave me time and space to heal and rebuild without desperation driving every decision. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping other women in similar situations. Because not everyone has a secret inheritance. Not everyone has a safety net. But everyone deserves the chance to escape, to rebuild, to discover who they are without someone else's cruelty defining them. Through my scholarship fund and mentorship work, I try to be for other women what my father's gift was for me: a resource, a safety net, a belief in their potential. I can't give everyone $12 million, but I can give them knowledge, connections, opportunities, belief. Sometimes that's enough to change everything. I've met women who remind me so much of who I was. Bright, capable, beaten down by partners who saw them as competition instead of companions, who felt trapped by circumstance or fear or lack of options. And I've watched some of them transform. Leave bad situations, start businesses, go back to school, rebuild their lives. Become versions of themselves that were always there, just waiting for permission to emerge. That's what makes everything I went through worth it. Not the revenge, not even the justice, but the ability to help others find their way out of the darkness. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your relationship, if you feel yourself becoming smaller, less confident, more dependent, pay attention to that. Don't dismiss your own feelings because someone else tells you you're being paranoid or insecure. Second, protect yourself. I don't mean become paranoid or suspicious of everyone, but know your financial situation. Have access to important documents. Keep some resources in your own name. It's not about planning for betrayal. It's about being practical. Third, know that leaving is possible. It might not be easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do, but it's possible. There are resources, lawyers who work on sliding scales, shelters, support groups, people who want to help. Fourth, you are not defined by someone else's treatment of you. Daniel's cruelty said everything about him and nothing about my actual worth. Whatever your partner, parent, boss, anyone tells you about your value, that's their opinion, not objective truth. Fifth, rock bottom can be a foundation. When you lose everything, you get to rebuild deliberately. To choose what matters. To create something authentic and true to who you really are. And finally, the best revenge is a life well lived. Not a life lived to prove something to someone who wronged you, but a life lived for yourself, with intention, with joy, with purpose. Daniel took a lot from me, years of my life. My trust, my sense of security, my belief in happily ever after. But he didn't break me. He didn't diminish me. He didn't win. Because I'm still here, stronger, wiser, more myself than I've ever been. And he's somewhere out there, living with the consequences of his choices, with the knowledge that he destroyed something real for something temporary. That he traded gold for fool's gold and lost everything in the process. I don't hate him. I don't even think about him most days, but I do thank him sometimes. Because his betrayal forced me to find strength I didn't know I had. To build a life I never would have imagined. To become someone I'm genuinely proud to be. He thought throwing me out with nothing would destroy me. Instead, it freed me. And that old bank card from my father, the one I almost threw away, the one I kept out of sentiment, turned out to be exactly what I needed, exactly when I needed it. Some people call that luck. Some call it fate. Some call it karma. I call it my father watching out for me even after he was gone. Making sure his daughter had what she needed to stand up for herself, to fight back, to win. So that's my story. The story of how my husband threw me out with nothing and how an old bank card exposed everything and changed my life forever. It's a story about betrayal and revenge, yes. But it's also a story about resilience, about discovering your own strength, about refusing to accept someone else's assessment of your worth. If you're going through something similar, know that you're not alone. Know that survival is possible. Know that there's a version of your life waiting for you on the other side of fear, and it's so much better than you can imagine right now. And if you're the person doing the betraying, stop. Just stop. The temporary satisfaction of getting away with something isn't worth the permanent damage you'll do to your own soul. As for me, I'm still building. Still growing. Still becoming more fully myself every day. My father told me in his letter that we Chens don't stay down. He was right. And neither do you. Remember that. Whatever you're facing, whatever knock you've taken, you don't have to stay down. You can get back up. You can fight back. You can build something beautiful from the ruins. I did, and if I can do it, so can you.